how has your great-grandfather's legacy affected your life?
I would say massively, in the sense that I have a real, I think because Robert had so much bad press.
You don't shut that hole in your face!
I think it sort of almost sent me on a mission to put things right.
What's good, guys? Today I want to share with you part 2 of my interview with Simon Medhurst. This is going to be the Q&A session. Now, if you guys haven't watched part 1 of this video, Simon Medhurst is the great-grandson of Quartermaster Hichens. And Quartermaster Hichens was the man at the helm when Titanic hit the iceberg. I highly suggest you guys watch that video first, just because we do a deep dive into the life of Quartermaster Hichens and we talk about the untold story of Robert Hichens. And you guys can click here and watch that video. Okay, so after the 1 hour long chat that I had with Simon, I picked a couple questions from our Titanic nerd community and I asked him some of your questions. So these come from my YouTube comments, from Instagram, and also from TikTok. Okay, so let's dive right into question number 1. This one comes from YouTube user Cassiopeus Gordon Klein. What were Quartermaster Hichens' thoughts immediately before and after the collision? Did he realize the crash was inevitable? Did he realize the chances of survival were rather dim? And did he feel somehow responsible?
I would have said, to a certain extent, we know that beforehand his mind was focused on the compass and all that was there. So there would have been nothing in his mind, I wouldn't have thought, particularly except for focus exactly what he was doing. Afterwards, he probably wouldn't have had a clue, to a certain extent, what was going on until, you know, whether Thomas Andrews came into the wheelhouse or whether Bruce Ismay and the captain, whether there was conversations that went on that he would have heard. Obviously, he was still at the wheel at this point. He's still doing exactly what he's been asked to do. He hasn't done a runner. He's still standing there waiting for orders. He's not doing anything else apart from, you know, the ship stopped. He's just waiting for orders, really. And then I say the orders didn't. He was just to stay there. And it's about 12:15 was when he was given the orders to do the next thing. So for him, I don't think he would have had any ideas except maybe what he may have heard. What we don't know is what he would have heard. But obviously for him, he's straight out and undoing boats, getting into a boat, and then just straight away. His focus is literally on what he's been told. I've no doubt that once he's in the lifeboat and they're sitting out at sea, I've no doubt there was a whole raft of things going through his mind. What he could have done. Could he have done anything different? There wasn't anything else he could have done differently because he'd done exactly what he was asked to do. So there's nothing he could have done. Whether afterwards, I don't know. I would have said no. There's nothing he could have physically done different. Could he have blamed himself? I don't know that he could even blame himself. He might have felt that maybe his behaviour on a boat wasn't the best. Maybe afterwards he maybe regretted some of the things he might have said. But I think when it comes to following orders, I think he was spot on with the orders, due to the fact that even in the inquiry, there's no question about that he did anything wrong at all, up to the point maybe of a few little things that might have been said in the boat.
So his mindset was just, okay, let's do the orders, let's get everything done, because
yes.
I guess some people almost think that he would have had all the knowledge that some of the officers would have had, right? Do you think that he knew that the ship was doomed immediately after the Titanic hit the iceberg?
I personally don't think he did. I think it wasn't really known straight away anyway, was it? I mean, you had a bit of time for Thomas Andrews to actually assess the situation, and whether they talked about it in the hearing of the quartermasters, I don't know. He may have known more than a lot of people knew, but I don't know. I mean, I would have said that he may have known a little bit more as time went on. I think being told to get the lifeboats out, and probably he would have seen maybe a slight list on the compass and those sort of things that would have made him think things aren't quite right here.
Okay, let's move on to another question that also comes from YouTube. And by the way, guys, if you guys want to participate in these sorts of interactive questions and whatnot and be featured in other videos, Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and of course to subscribe to the channel. So the next question comes from Leuven Gamer. Can you ask him if he knows if his great-grandfather felt guilt for hitting the ice?
I think he probably, I think anybody would regret the fact that they were at the wheel. He probably would have always wished that somebody else would have been at the wheel rather than him, because he got, obviously was known as the one that was at the wheel when it hit the iceberg. And even later in life, I think, even when he was in prison, there was a reporter sent in, I think at the time, because there's a newspaper article around about 1935, which I possess, which is supposedly Robert Hichens' story of what happened that night. Interestingly, the newspaper gets his age wrong and all sorts of things. So I'm not sure whether the press is any different then as it was today. So, but he did a newspaper article, which was by Robert Hichens in about 1935. So he was known as the man that was at the wheel. So he probably regrets the fact that he was there at that point. And if it had been, say, quarter of an hour later, he wouldn't have been. He'd have been probably in his bunk at the time rather than at the wheel. I don't think anybody would want to be in his position, to be quite honest.
Yeah, maybe we wouldn't even be talking about him, right? Because not a lot of other quartermasters were talked about.
Yeah, he would have just been another crew member, just another crew member.
All right, now we got some Instagram questions. This question comes from user SQR186. How has your great-grandfather's legacy affected your life?
I would say massively, in the sense that I have I think because Robert had so much bad press, I think it sort of almost sent me on a mission to put things right. And so I feel that, as I say, Robert wasn't perfect, as none of us are, but I do feel that he did exactly what he was asked to do. But I think it's become my mission, really. And I think with the Instagram page and with Facebook and whenever I can, the opportunity just to maybe just talk about him and show him as a real person. We all see the film, we always see just Robert Hichens, but he was a man, he was a family man. He had children, he had, I don't know, I should say about 8 children. I'm not sure now, I'll get it right at the end. But, he had children, so he was a family man, loved his wife, and suffered after the sinking. So that story is really what I'm after getting out, really. And I'd say thanks to you that that's the opportunity I've been given even this evening to just get a little bit of information out there.
Now we got another Instagram question. This one is by user nwerful, and this one was actually asked quite a bit. And the question is, do you have any Titanic heirlooms? Robert
Hichens never really had anything. When he died, he basically was put in a pauper's grave as such. So he never really had anything. Now the only thing I do have a couple of photos. One that was given about 1928 when he was in Hong Kong. It was obviously sent back to his wife, which I now have in my possession. The other thing I have is a tray, which was after Titanic, he had a tray which he used on his journeys, which is like a wooden tray. I think there's a picture of it on my Instagram page down further. I might dig that one out and put that back on Instagram. What I'll do is I'll send you some pictures. You can put some things on. But the tray is interesting. My dad gave it to me because he remembers having it as a child, given to him by his mum. He had it, and he said that this bit here is a stain where I spilt my milk when I was little. So it's something that's been passed down the family, and I now look after it as I'm the custodian of that one. So that's the only thing that I know of that is at all ever that's owned by Robert Hichens is this tray, wooden tray that had a map of the world on the tray. But that's the only thing, as far as I know, that he owned or was passed on and now is in my possession to look after. So that's the only heirloom, as far as I know, apart from the prison letters, obviously, that are handwritten by Robert.
Next question is a very interesting question. Comes from user @Pickleson_is_bay. What was Quartermaster Hichens' personality like?
He was. I spoke to my cousin once, and she said that he was known as Banjo Bob. Interestingly, I think he was. I personally think he was a family man. So I think personally, he was a Cornishman. He was probably rough and ready. He was a sailor. But I think actually, yeah, I mean, obviously later in life, he suffered with those things. But I think someone buying a boat, I think it was called the Queen Mary in Torquay. It was like a pleasure cruise type thing. So I imagine that he would have had people on there and he would have talked about whatever. And I think he would have been quite a happy-go-lucky sort of cheerful bloke. So that's my thoughts of him. I don't think of him as harsh, maybe, but just like you and me, really. Just a normal fella.
Yeah.
But on the lifeboat, probably scared stiff. They talk about him trembling like an aspen, but to be honest, he was freezing cold. He didn't have a hat. I don't know what happened to his hat, but he didn't have a hat, whether in the rush and what have you, but he didn't have a hat on, so he was freezing cold. I think anybody might be a little bit temperamental in that position. Yeah. But yeah, so I think maybe a happy chappy, if you want to put it like that. I don't think he was. Yeah, I'm going to put him over as a happy chappy. Yeah.
Nice. Alrighty, and the last question of the day. And this question comes from user Seb Montoya Isaza. What would you have asked your great-grandfather about the Titanic if you had met him?
I think I would personally have asked him exactly what happened. I'd like to know exactly what happened, because I think there are a few mysteries about what happened in that wheelhouse just after the bell rang. I think there are some things that I'm not quite sure. There are a few questions I've got in my mind, but I think I would like him to just run through exactly moment by moment what happened from the moment he was asked to turn hard to starboard. From that moment onward, I'd like to just sit there and listen to him tell the whole story, going right through to when he was dropped off in Carpathia. When he went on to Carpathia, I'd love to know just what happened, because we can all think of what we think might have happened, but there are so many questions that no one really knows. Some of the smaller insignificant things that maybe we would miss, but I'd like to just know all of those. Who came into the wheelhouse? Who spoke? What was Captain Smith doing? What was his reaction? What was his face like? What was Thomas Andrews' face like? What were the other officers? Murdoch, who didn't survive. What was he like? What was his reaction? So it's those sort of things. I'd just love to know the details, but we'll never get those. We get the inquiries, which gives us quite a lot of detail, but even in the inquiries, I think maybe they didn't ask the right questions. Some of them, they were a bit sort of vague on some of the questioning, whether that was to protect the White Star Line, maybe a little bit of that going on.
Maybe they were focused on, the technical aspects as opposed to the human side of things. Yeah.
But I'm very thankful for the inquiry. If you go onto the inquiry, there's a website that has the inquiry. I think it's inquiry.net. I'm not sure, but that gives you the whole inquiry, and you can look up Robert Hichens. You can see exactly what he said, his reply to the questions, and all those sort of things, which can be a bit of an eye opener as well, because it gives you all the little details.
And he testified in both the American and British inquiries.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was. In fact, he was taken to the US. Trying to think how it worked. He was taken to the US inquiry, and then when he got to the UK, he was actually taken on another ship to go to Plymouth. But the police actually stopped him before he got too far, because they wanted him to take part in the London inquiry as well. So he then appeared in the London inquiry as well. So yeah, he's in some ways it's quite nice, because it gives me his voice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Without the inquiry, you've got nothing. But with that, you can read what Robert says, and you can almost feel him reading it, because it's his wording, it's the way he says it, it's the accent almost comes out in some of it.
Right.
So I encourage anybody, if they're interested in Titanic, to go and have a look at the inquiry. and just read some of the questioning and the answers by different people, by Lightoller and Fleet and I say Robert Hichens and others.
Really random question, Simon, but for those of us who aren't really too familiar with all these different regional accents, do you know what he may have sounded like? Could you give us an impression of what that accent?
Well, I don't think I can.
I'm putting you on the spot. I know
you are putting me on the spot here. Yeah, I couldn't do it. What you've got to remember is I'm from London, so I have a London accent. So that doesn't help with being a Cornish man. So you can't. I can't really give you that. You probably have to go on YouTube and look up Cornishman's accent, and you'll probably find it.
Yeah.
Cold as a quilkin.
Cold as a quilkin, which is Cornish for a frog.
A stagged. You're stagged up to the eyebrows. In other words, you're covered in mud and muck.
Oh, we've been for a good old stank.
Or a stank.
Good old stank, and that is Cornish.
But he would have had quite a twang of an accent, I think. So being a Londoner doesn't help that. So even though I've got Cornish blood in me, I'm very much London, and drop my H's, drop my T's, all sorts of things.
And there you have it, folks. Once again, this one was part 2. This was just the Q&A. In part 1, like I said, we do a deep dive and look at the life of Quartermaster Hichens. So if you haven't watched that yet, you can watch the untold story of Quartermaster Hichens' life right over here. And if you've ever wondered what would have happened if Titanic hit the iceberg head on, you can watch this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and also thank you so much for the new Titanic nerds that have recently subscribed. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The link to all the merch is in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.